During a captivating cruise, the unassuming Alyssa finds herself enchanted by a mysterious stranger who vanishes into thin air. Months later, she learns she is expecting triplets and sets out to find him. What's the most unexpected revelation? The individual is, in fact, the wealthy proprietor of the opulent ship fleet. Now, both must navigate their skepticism to discover genuine affection. Before we embark on the complete narrative, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from and what the clock reads on your end. Join the channel now, and let's dive in. Alyssa could scarcely contain her excitement as she strolled down the bustling pier, a small suitcase in tow, her gaze locked on the grand cruise ship that towered before her. Scores of individuals were bustling around, some hauling coordinated bags, while others captured spontaneous moments with beaming expressions. She was consumed by the thought of this journey, one she had never imagined she could finance, leaving her hands damp and uneasy around the grip of her suitcase. Yet here she stood, a complimentary pass in hand, poised to embark on a lavish cruise that promised evenings of twirling beneath the celestial canopy, exquisite meals, and the kind of indulgence she typically only witnessed on screen. She took a brief moment to absorb everything around her. The vessel loomed over her, its gleaming white exterior shimmering in the sunlight. As she stood in line with fellow travelers, she could hear the murmur of conversation mingling with the far-off cries of seagulls. Her heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of nerves and pure excitement. She told herself that she was worthy of a bit of joy. Recently, life has presented its challenges, strained finances, relentless job searches, and rent that's fallen behind. Securing that ticket seemed like a serendipitous blessing, a hint that perhaps her luck was on the verge of transformation. As she boarded, she was welcomed by eager crew members presenting vibrant beverages adorned with miniature umbrellas. Her face brightened with a hint of joy as she accepted one, the delightful aroma of tropical fruit rising around her. She expressed her gratitude to the young attendant, who responded with a polite bow, before guiding her towards the reception area. She made her way down the lengthy corridor towards her cabin at the very end. As she stepped inside, she observed the unadorned space, a solitary bed, a porthole revealing the infinite shimmer of ocean waves, and just enough room to maneuver her suitcase. Yet, it maintained a sense of freshness and neatness. She found herself measuring its size against the expansive suites she had glimpsed on her journey, yet she swiftly dismissed any flicker of jealousy. This exceeded all her wildest dreams. Once she had unpacked, she strolled to one of the open decks, leaning against the railing as she gazed at the late afternoon sky transforming into a stunning blend of oranges and pinks. A gentle breeze danced through her hair, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, she allowed herself to take a deep breath. Perhaps this evening, she mused, she would venture to discover the ship. Perhaps she would explore one of those upscale cocktail lounges she had come across in the brochure. Who would have thought? This could be an opportunity to venture beyond her familiar boundaries and set aside her concerns. The arrival of nightfall was marked by a vibrant surge of energy. The inaugural celebration of the cruise embraced a vibrant Caribbean theme, featuring lively steel drums, energetic DJs, and eye-catching decorations. Alyssa stepped into the vibrant atmosphere, clad in a borrowed sundress that was simple yet charming, her heart fluttering with a hint of uncertainty. She found herself alone, without a partner or a circle of friends to share the moment with, and her self-consciousness surged as she observed the graceful guests gliding across the dance floor. Still, the music called out. She allowed the steady beat to lead her, swaying softly with her eyes shut, embracing the experience as it enveloped her. In the midst of the pulsating rhythms and dazzling illumination, a soft voice emerged from behind her. "Could I accompany you?" She glanced over to find a remarkably attractive man, his eyes sparkling with intrigue and a subtle smile dancing at the corners of his mouth. He presented himself as Ethan, extending a courteous hand to guide her into the vibrant center of the dance floor. Alyssa experienced a blend of appreciation and bashful thrill, unable to overlook the immediate flicker of allure. His strides exuded assurance yet felt effortless. He remained humble and didn't attempt to impress her. He kept in step with her, leading her softly, ensuring her comfort throughout. As she looked up, she noticed him observing her face, as if he were attempting to imprint her features in his mind. Their dialogue moved with a grace reminiscent of a well-rehearsed choreography. Ethan inquired about how she found herself on the cruise, and with a shy smile, Alyssa admitted that she had won the ticket. He appeared truly captivated by her narrative, expressing that she was fortunate in a gentle tone that nearly conveyed a hint of envy. She observed, however, that whenever she attempted to inquire about his past, he responded with ambiguous phrases, "I travel frequently for work," or "I needed a respite from obligations." Yet, there was a warmth to him, and she felt a growing curiosity to uncover the layers of his story. Once the set concluded, they felt the music was somewhat overpowering for meaningful dialogue and quietly made their way to a more serene deck. The moon loomed above, a colossal pearl casting its shimmering reflection upon the undulating water. Alyssa leaned against the railing, her arms relaxed as Ethan stood close by, their shoulders nearly brushing against each other. They playfully reminisced about the flurry of dancing, exchanged their favorite music styles, and chuckled over amusing cruise incidents from that night, such as a guest who eagerly attempted to limbo but found themselves stuck midway. As she brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, Ethan reached out, softly tucking it behind her ear. The gesture carried an unexpected closeness, stirring a flutter in her stomach. She discovered a smile spreading across her face, so broad that it made her cheeks hurt. He gazed at her as though she were the sole individual amidst the throng on that bustling ship, instilling a sense of safety and uniqueness within her, despite the fact that they were still nearly unfamiliar to one another. They strolled along the deck for a time, the sound of their footsteps gently reverberating. Every fresh topic of discussion fostered a feeling of closeness, whether it revolved around shared literary favorites or the far-off destinations on their travel aspirations. She playfully chided him for being so reserved about his life, and he laughed, admitting that he liked to maintain a straightforward and private approach. It seemed a bit enigmatic to her, yet she found herself too enchanted by his inviting aura to inquire any deeper. Ultimately, they discovered themselves close to the lifeboats, sheltered from inquisitive gazes. The gentle murmur of the waves and the sporadic call of a seagull beneath the moonlight created an ethereal atmosphere, enveloping the scene in a surreal embrace. As he approached, the distance between them diminished, culminating in a soft, tender kiss that spoke volumes. It was fleeting, yet it took her breath away. They separated and gazed at one another, a shared sense of awe enveloping them, as if they both understood that this was something far deeper than a mere chance encounter on the ship. Their footsteps led them back to the main deck, where the celebration continued to thrive. He assured her they would reunite the next day, perhaps to enjoy breakfast together or to discover an unexplored section of the ship. With a heart brimming with joy, Alyssa whispered her goodnight. Upon returning to her cabin, she collapsed onto the bed, her mind swirling with every intricate detail. Ethan's soft-spoken humor, his reassuring grin, the moonlight casting a gentle glow on his features, her cheeks flushed at the recollection of their dance and that instant when their fingers intertwined. Fatigued from the night of dancing and elated by the evening's surprising twist, she drifted off to sleep, envisioning all the ways they could enjoy the remainder of their journey together. As dawn broke, she stirred from her slumber sooner than she typically would, filled with anticipation to see him once more. As she meandered through the lively breakfast hall, her gaze swept across each table, yet his familiar silhouette was nowhere to be found. She examined the pool deck. Silence. Outside the lounge where they had danced, she inquired of the bartender whether he had spotted anyone matching Ethan's description. With a courteous shrug, he replied that he couldn't remember a guest by that name. Confused, she approached a few crew members who courteously shook their heads. A more extensive search, involving a stroll through various hallways and a polite question at the front desk, yielded no leads. Ethan seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Perplexed and grappling with an encroaching feeling of disillusionment, she attempted to engage in self-reflection. Maybe he had embarked on an early adventure at one of the ports or succumbed to an illness. Yet, the persistent unease in her gut would not fade away. By midday, she had nearly depleted all her choices. She had inquired subtly, cast her gaze into every shared space, and moved quietly through the restricted areas of the ship, just in case he happened to be present. Every courteous inquiry she made for passenger information was met with gracious yet resolute denials. That evening, she found herself once more on the deck, observing as the horizon transformed into a canvas of gold and rose hues. A subtle chill enveloped the air, prompting her to draw her arms around her shoulders, grappling with the unsettling anxiety that this remarkable, enchanting man could have disappeared just as quickly as he had come into her life. Alyssa stands solitary on the deck, an unsettling feeling coiling within her chest. She holds tightly to the memory of their enchanting meeting, pondering whether Ethan was merely a figment of her imagination or if a deeper mystery lies beneath. Alyssa stirred awake at the break of dawn, her mind a tempest of reflections from the night before. She found herself endlessly revisiting each moment of her meeting with Ethan, the glimmer in his gaze, the softness in his tone, the way he led her with a serene assurance on the dance floor. The dawn cast gentle hues of pink through her cabin porthole, urging her to step outside, where the fresh morning breeze and vast ocean could calm her unsettled spirit. On the deck, she braced herself against the railing, determined to locate Ethan before the cruise came to a close. It was merely the second complete day on the ocean, and yet she sensed the clock already counting down. She rushed to the breakfast buffet, eager to see if the hostess had any information. The gentle clatter of cutlery and the soft murmur of voices created an inviting atmosphere. With a small plate of fresh fruit in hand, she made her way to the hostess stand, politely clearing her throat. The hostess, a jovial woman with a radiant smile, welcomed her as if she were just another traveler. Alyssa started off cautiously, detailing Ethan's characteristics and sharing the scant details she possessed. The woman contorted her face in a gesture of apology. She described how she encountered numerous guests daily, making it difficult to distinguish one from another, particularly with the constant flow of people coming and going. Alyssa attempted to apply some pressure. Perhaps he had provided a name for the booking. Yet the hostess simply shook her head. It lacked clarity. Alyssa expressed her gratitude, albeit with a hint of disappointment, before continuing on her way. She chose to next visit the bar where they had shared their first dance. The recollection of the lively celebration lingered vividly in her thoughts. Whirling colors, joyous sounds, the flavor of rum punch lingering on her mouth. In the gentle morning light, the bar appeared transformed. Serene and meticulously arranged, with chairs piled atop tables, the aroma of freshly applied cleaner lingers in the atmosphere. A solitary bartender meticulously aligned the bottles in a neat row, readying for the impending afternoon crowd. Alyssa moved in closer. "Excuse me," she murmured gently. "I was present here last night. You may have been of assistance to me." She felt a twinge of embarrassment, confessing that she hadn't really focused on who had been serving her drinks. "I found myself swaying with another person. Heightened presence, deep locks, captivating grin. Did you catch a glimpse of us? Do you recall him in any way?" The bartender hesitated for a moment, then offered a subtle, contemplative nod. "Many attractive men pass by here," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "Perhaps I observed one engaging in conversation with a young woman near the dance floor. He was unable to provide anything beyond that. A fleeting memory lingered of a man who settled his bill in cash, left behind a generous gratuity, and vanished into the night before the doors closed. While it provided a slight reassurance that her perceptions were grounded in reality, it did little to advance her search for Ethan. With a nod of appreciation to the bartender, she glided into the ship's labyrinthine passages. Her steps were driven by resolve, even as uncertainty deepened. Every person she engaged with either offered a courteous shrug or professed ignorance. Was Ethan intentionally steering clear of her, or was she merely inquiring with the wrong individuals? She approached the pool deck with a sense of curiosity. Lounge chairs sprawled elegantly across the polished floor, while the lively conversations of carefree vacationers danced through the atmosphere. Swimmers danced in the vibrant blue water. Alyssa moved slowly, carefully observing every face she encountered. Lips slightly parted, ready to call out his name at the first sight of him. Her heart raced whenever she caught sight of dark hair from a distance, only to discover it was a young person wearing a baseball cap or an older man engrossed in a book by the pool. After almost an hour of aimless wandering, she settled into a cool chair, contemplating her next step. A gentle touch on her shoulder caught her off guard. She glanced upward to spot a warm and welcoming cabin stewardess she had encountered earlier that day. The stewardess visited Alyssa's room to deliver fresh towels and found herself engaged in conversation with her for a few minutes. The woman extended a compassionate smile, recognizing Alyssa's irritation. The stewardess spoke softly, noticing your unease. Is all well? Alyssa paused, yet she felt compelled to share the tale of her enigmatic dance partner, who had disappeared without a word. The stewardess paid close attention, nodding occasionally and assuring that she would be vigilant for any clues in the staff corridors. Alyssa experienced a wave of relief at the presence of even a small ally in her quest. Finally, there was someone who acknowledged her concerns. With a renewed sense of determination, Alyssa rose once more, choosing to venture into uncharted areas of the ship. At the rear, a lineup of secured doors and tight corridors suggested areas off-limits to the crew. She strolled by the sign that declared, "Crew only, no passengers beyond this point," and felt an irresistible urge to glance inside. Before she could fully process her intrigue, a formidable security guard emerged, his gaze sharp, courteously instructing her to move aside. His tone was firm yet compassionate. He clarified that specific areas were restricted due to concerns for safety and privacy. Alyssa attempted to explain that she was merely searching for someone, but the guard interrupted her with a decisive shake of his head. Not here, he declared with certainty. With a flush of embarrassment warming her cheeks, she nodded, offered an apology, and retreated. As she rounded the corner, she nearly bumped into a second guard who appeared out of nowhere. The man regarded her with a wary gaze, weighing the option of guiding her back to the passenger decks. "Apologies," she murmured, fighting to regain her composure. With a brief grunt, he stepped aside, permitting her to go by. She rushed off, her thoughts swirling in a tempest. What's with all the hesitation? Were they merely fulfilling their duties, or was there a deeper reason for their cautious demeanor? A faint thrum of anxiety intertwined with her irritation. She felt an incessant unease, as if Ethan was ensnared in a web of complexities that defied simple understanding. Later that afternoon, exhausted from her unproductive quest, she felt an irresistible pull to the bar once again. Perhaps a staff member might submit an item to the lost and found. Individuals often misplace their possessions, and maybe Ethan had inadvertently left a hint behind. She made her way to the bartender from earlier, who was now occupied mixing drinks for sunburnt vacationers craving cocktails. He looked at her with a hint of acknowledgement, offering a courteous nod. She remained poised, biding her time until he was available. "Has anyone forgotten something?" she inquired gently, a hint of embarrassment coloring her words. "I continue to hold on to the hope of discovering that individual." For a fleeting moment, he appeared uncertain, as though contemplating his choice of words. He leaned in, his eyes scanning the surroundings intently. "A wristband," he murmured softly. "Elegant gold design. It was discovered close to the bar, likely from last night. I can't be certain who it belongs to, but," he took a step back and searched through a small drawer under the counter, pulling out a polished gold band. He extended it towards her with subtlety. Alyssa delicately flipped it over in her hands. It was weightier than she had anticipated, marked on the underside with the initials ED. Her heart raced. The letters throbbed with untapped significance. "Ethan Davis?" she murmured, a spark of thrill igniting her gaze. The bartender gave a noncommittal shrug, a gesture that neither affirmed nor refuted her inquiry. Yet, it was clear he was making an effort to assist while carefully respecting his limits. "Thank you," she whispered, holding the wristband close to her heart. She offered him a thankful nod, quietly slipping away to avoid drawing too much notice. Every thought in her mind began to whirl together in a chaotic dance. If this truly belonged to Ethan, it confirmed his existence. She had not conjured his name, nor the bond they shared, nor the kiss exchanged beneath the moonlight last night. A sense of relief intertwined with unease as she remembered the peculiar actions of the security guard and the staff's consistent evasion of her inquiries. As the loudspeaker crackled to life, announcing the imminent docking of the ship at a sun-kissed tropical port for the day's adventures, Alyssa sensed the weight of time bearing down on her shoulders. She became part of the bustling crowd of travelers making their way to the exit ramps, only partially attuned to the lively discussions surrounding nearby beaches and markets. In her pocket lay the evidence that Ethan had visited, if only briefly, to leave behind something so precious. What could have caused his disappearance, and why did the staff appear to be so guarded? She stood by the railings, observing the steady stream of passengers as they disembarked, some in vibrant floral shirts, others sporting wide-brimmed hats. A vibrant steel drum band greeted them as they stepped onto the shore. Usually, she would be excited about the idea of exploring a new location. Yet today, unease consumed her. If Ethan remained aboard the ship, the clock was ticking to locate him. If he had already departed, how could she possibly locate him? Startled from her reverie by the commotion around her, she quickly resolved to act. She felt an undeniable reluctance to depart from the ship just yet. Strolling through the port could offer a sense of calm, yet it would do little to resolve her growing inquiries. Instead, she would take advantage of the quieter hours, when most were out exploring, to delve deeper into her research. Yet, that strategy seemed fraught with uncertainty. A quick look at the resolute security personnel positioned on each deck served as a reminder for her to tread carefully. She couldn't allow herself to be distracted by her curiosity. The faint hint she possessed could easily elude her grasp forever. Holding the wristband close, she vowed to uncover the truth. She inhaled deeply, attempting to steady her pounding heart, and allowed the surge of departing passengers to push her onward. As the passengers start to disembark, Alyssa tightly grips the wristband marked ED. Etched upon it, heart racing at the notion that Ethan could be lingering just beyond my grasp. Alyssa's shoes echoed on the ship's gangway as she stepped off, her gaze scanning the crowd in a final, frantic effort to find Ethan. The fierce Caribbean sun blazed overhead, yet her mind raced with thoughts more tumultuous than the lively pier below. She held on to the hope that he would show up at the final hour, perhaps emerging onto the deck recalling her name through the loudspeaker. Yet the impeccably dressed gentleman who had captivated her had disappeared as suddenly as he had come. A sharp pang of disappointment coursed through her, sending a shiver down her spine. Every detail of their meeting, the dancing, the late-night conversation, that magical kiss, seemed too vivid to be a figment of imagination. Yet, if it wasn't merely a figment of her imagination, why was there no evidence of his existence? A taxi lingered outside the cruise terminal, its engine softly humming. Alyssa settled into the back seat, holding her petite suitcase close as the driver inquired about her destination. She paused at the inquiry, briefly losing herself in the moment before remembering the pull of her everyday existence. The driver reiterated his question, and she provided the name of her unassuming apartment complex. With a sudden jolt, the cab surged forward, navigating through the bustling midday traffic of the city. As they navigated the bustling streets, Alyssa noticed joyful travelers making their way to hotels, their arms heavy with bags filled with souvenirs. She felt a profound sense that her own journey had come to a premature close, leaving things unresolved in some way. With her forehead resting against the glass, she reflected on the golden wristband engraved with the initials ED. Currently nestled within her purse. The recollection of that revelation continued to inspire her, yet it offered no relief from the persistent feeling of bewilderment. Had Ethan abandoned the ship intentionally, leaving her with nothing but a whirlwind of questions? Upon her return home, the tight confines of her apartment starkly contrasted with the dazzling allure and excitement of the cruise. After settling the fare with the driver, she wearily ascended the stairs and entered the room, where a half-completed to-do list on the fridge and a pile of unopened mail on the counter stood as poignant reminders of everyday existence. She placed her suitcase on the ground, breathing in the comforting aroma of her own culinary creations mingling with the subtle hints of cleaning products. It had a peculiar warmth to it, though tinged with solitude. On that initial night home, she attempted to occupy her mind with folding laundry and playing her favorite tunes, yet her thoughts continually wandered back to Ethan, his inviting smile, the way he absorbed her every word, and the undeniable attraction she sensed when he was near. On a sudden impulse, she attempted to reach out to the cruise company, seeking to locate him via the passenger list. After wading through a sea of automated responses, she eventually connected with a courteous yet detached representative who firmly stated that sharing personal information was not an option. With a heavy heart, Alyssa slipped into bed, holding the gold wristband tightly. She reassured herself that maybe tomorrow would bring a sense of tranquility, a newfound ability to release her burdens. Yet the dawn unveiled an unforeseen twist. Alyssa stirred awake, a wave of nausea washing over her, the acrid taste of bile propelling her towards the cramped bathroom. She sank to the cool tiles, trembling as she focused on steadying her breath. She attributed it to residual stress from the journey, or perhaps something she consumed the night before. Still, the illness persisted into the next day, and the one after that, rendering her frail and perplexed. After nearly a week of relentless exhaustion and a dizzying sensation that struck whenever she stood up too fast, she resolved it was time to consult a doctor. She scheduled a visit at the nearby clinic, a modest structure with worn floors and signs urging visitors to maintain hand hygiene. The waiting room buzzed with the sounds of coughing children and weary parents, yet, at last, Alyssa settled onto the exam table, the protective paper crinkling softly beneath her. A warm doctor inquired about her symptoms, conducted a brief set of tests, and then wondered if there was any possibility of her being pregnant. The inquiry took her by surprise, leaving her more taken aback than she had anticipated. She hesitated, suggesting that it could happen, though it wasn't exactly in the works. The doctor nodded with understanding and stepped out to conduct a test, coming back after what seemed like ages. "Alyssa," she started gently, "you are expecting." The echoes lingered in the confined space. The physician included an additional comment, probably meant to comfort, yet Alyssa's thoughts were already in a tumultuous spin. She was expecting. Visions of Ethan's face danced through her mind. In an instant, she found herself overwhelmed by a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a peculiar, warm glimmer of hope. With her bag in hand, she stepped outside, her knees trembling beneath her. Her universe had just turned upside down, leaving her utterly uncertain about what to do next. In just a matter of days, following more comprehensive examinations, the revelations grew even more remarkable. She was carrying not just one baby, but three. Threefold. The discovery sent a shiver through her fingers as she grasped the ultrasound images, gazing at the three minuscule forms. The doctor delivered a serious yet encouraging discussion regarding the difficulties associated with high-risk pregnancies, emphasizing the necessity of adequate rest, nutrition, and regular checkups. Alyssa sensed a heavy weight descend upon her shoulders. How could she, struggling to make ends meet, possibly manage 3 babies all by herself? That evening, she perched on the edge of her bed, phone clutched in her hand, unable to tear her eyes away from her call history, half hoping for a miraculous text from Ethan. Naturally, there was absolutely nothing. She came to understand that her knowledge of him was minimal, only his first name, a suggestion of his frequent travels, and the initials etched on the wristband. Is it possible for ED? Transform into a completely different person? The faint chance lingered in her mind, yet her intuition firmly pointed to Ethan Davis. It was necessary. She reached out to the cruise company once more, this time with greater determination, attaching scans of her ticket and mentioning the date of the party, aiming to prompt a response from someone. The automated replies validated her deepest anxieties. It seemed improbable that she would ever reach someone genuinely invested in providing assistance. Time slipped away, and still, there was no response. Alyssa found herself wandering the apartment, her thoughts interrupted by waves of morning sickness and a whirlwind of hormones that swung her between tears and unexpected joy. The moment she understood she would soon be a mother of 3 swept her into a whirlwind of exhilaration and anxiety. A friendly neighbor with a bold personality stopped by one afternoon. Alyssa was slumped on the couch, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Amidst her uneven breaths, Alyssa revealed the pregnancy, the lucky ticket, the mysterious man from the cruise, and her deep-seated fear of facing it all by herself. The neighbor leaned in, ears perked, and then enveloped Alyssa in a comforting embrace. "Hey, we'll find a way through this," she said softly, wiping away Alyssa's tears. "You possess great strength, and if a father figure exists, we will locate him." She suggested reaching out to acquaintances for help or even getting in touch with a lawyer friend, just to be prepared. The gesture alleviated some of the burden weighing on Alyssa's heart, yet she understood that this issue demanded more than mere camaraderie. She began her own exploration, typing E. Davis shipping mogul and cruise lines E. Davis scrolled through search bars in the quiet hours of the night, his eyes weary from the harsh light of the laptop screen. After numerous fruitless searches and unhelpful headlines, she ultimately stumbled upon a brief piece of information. Ethan Davis secures a luxury liner to enhance his fleet. The piece was brief, highlighting a young affluent tycoon who dominated a profitable cruise empire. No image accompanied the piece, yet the words sprang to life on the screen, causing her heart to race. Could it possibly be the same Ethan who vanished from her life? The deeper she delved, the more elusive references to E she uncovered. Davis, a reclusive billionaire known for shunning the spotlight. Certain articles portrayed him as a solitary individual who cherished his privacy, a person who seldom made public appearances and guarded his personal information closely. As she read, Alyssa felt a sense of conviction blossom within her heart. This had to be him, the Ethan she had danced with, the man who had left her with a gold wristband and an unforgettable memory. Yet how was she meant to reach out to someone so powerful, so shrouded in corporate barriers and surrounded by a legion of aides? She had already explored the straightforward option, reaching out to the cruise line directly, only to be met with a closed door. The words of her friend reverberated in her thoughts. "If a father is present, we will locate him." After days of uncertainty, Alyssa finally sensed her determination solidify. She lacked the option to surrender. 3 tiny lives were blossoming within her, and they had a right to understand their origins. She was entitled to clarity, and perhaps, just perhaps, a degree of encouragement. Equipped with the newfound insights from her online exploration, she set about gathering all her treasures, the wristband, ticket stubs, ultrasound images, and even a handful of candid photos she had captured during the cruise, despite Ethan's absence in each one. If the cruise company remains unresponsive, she might consider contacting a media outlet or a corporate representative for assistance. It was a daring endeavor, yet her little ones were deserving of every challenge she encountered. One evening, after a grueling day filled with endless emails and little progress, she sank onto her bed, phone clutched tightly in her hand. At that moment, another article emerged, as a local business journal had just published a piece regarding a recent acquisition within the Davis shipping empire. Alyssa's heart raced with intensity. With a quick click of the link, she felt her breath quicken as her eyes darted across the page. Alyssa gazes at a fresh headline regarding Ethan Davis, her heart racing as she comes to the undeniable conclusion that he is indeed the same man. Now she simply has to capture his attention. Alyssa stepped into the lobby of the towering glass building, a sense of being an imposter washing over her. Everything within sparkled with affluence, the marble floors, the lines of gleaming elevators, the elegantly attired individuals moving purposefully through the corridors. The ambient scent, a subtle mix of air conditioning and high-end cologne, appeared meticulously crafted to convey an aura of power and prestige. With a firm grip on her bag's handle, she made her way to the main reception desk, where a meticulously groomed woman greeted her with a courteous smile. "Good morning," Alyssa began softly, attempting to calm the flutter of nerves in her chest. "I'm here to meet with Ethan Davis." The receptionist raised an eyebrow just a touch, yet her smile persisted. "Could I inquire whether you have a scheduled appointment?" Alyssa took a deep breath. "I understand, but it's crucial that I have a conversation with him regarding an urgent personal issue. Is it feasible to send a message or—" "Apologies," the woman interjected, her gaze shifting to her computer screen. "Mr. Davis's calendar is full, and he seldom accommodates drop-in visits. Would you like me to guide you to his public relations department or maybe the general inquiry email?" Alyssa experienced a sudden expulsion of breath. "I've attempted to reach out via email," she said, her voice quivering with exasperation. "I never receive a response." The receptionist, tilting her head with understanding, offered Alyssa a small business card that held the company's main phone number and a standard email address. She added softly, "I wish I could do more, but Mr. Davis is incredibly busy." Alyssa gave a slight nod, whispered her gratitude, and moved to the side. She observed the receptionist's impeccably composed focus transition effortlessly to welcome the next individual in line, as though Alyssa had already disappeared. With a sense of urgency, she paused by a column, weighing her choices. She had journeyed to the city for this, navigating the bustling trains and preparing herself for the chance of rejection. It was challenging to maintain hope. After a brief pause, she resolved to explore an alternative method. She entered a quaint cafe on the ground floor of the building, ordered a tea that went almost unnoticed, and focused her attention on the lobby. Perhaps if she bided her time, she could encounter Ethan as he came or went. As the hours slowly passed and she drained her glass, there was still no indication of his presence, nor any hint that he had ever been there at all. All she could see were sharply dressed professionals rushing past, none resembling the man she'd encountered on the cruise. At last, a security guard came over with a courteous yet assertive request for her to refrain from lingering unless she intended to buy something. With a sense of determination, she mustered her courage for yet another try, addressing a man who seemed to be an assistant or a junior staff member. Upon her inquiry about Mr. Davis possibly stepping out for lunch, he regarded her with a look of confusion, then recommended she reach out through the standard procedures before quickly departing. It validated her deepest dread. Ethan's company stood as an impenetrable fortress, with no one daring to unlock its gates. That evening, Alyssa returned to her apartment and checked her email with a sense of detachment. A series of messages sent to the shipping conglomerate's different addresses remained without response. Her phone calls either went in circles or concluded with courteous dismissals. These days, she was met only by the quiet chime of unanswered calls, a never-ending series of automated prompts, and the flat, emotionless tone of virtual receptionists. She collapsed onto her couch, a wave of frustration washing over her as her pregnancy symptoms intensified. Her belly had yet to make a statement, but the relentless morning sickness and overwhelming fatigue were impossible to overlook. She pressed her fingers to her temples, attempting to dispel the relentless ache that had settled in after hours of unproductive searching. As she perused the local business news on her phone, a headline caused her heart to skip a beat. Charity Gala to highlight Davis Shipping's latest initiatives. Within the intricate details, there lay a reference to the rumored presence of Ethan Davis. The following morning, Alyssa was sifting through the aisles of a thrift shop, searching for a dress that wouldn't stretch her already tight budget. She chose a sleek black dress that accentuated her silhouette, even if it leaned a bit more towards formal than her usual style. She nervously adjusted the sleeves, reminding herself that if this event was her sole opportunity to connect with Ethan, she had to avoid appearing like an outsider. She lacked an invitation, any prestigious credentials, yet her determination was unwavering. That evening, the gala venue thrummed with the energy of elegantly attired guests arriving in stylish vehicles. Massive floodlights bathed the building's elaborate entrance in light, where a shining banner proclaimed, "Charity Night, presented by Davis Shipping." Alyssa stood on the sidewalk, her heart racing, as she struggled to calm her breath. From this vantage point, she observed a crimson carpet unfurled along the staircase. Photographers barked commands at celebrities and socialites, their cameras erupting in bursts of light. She discovered a subtle side entrance where less prominent guests and staff quietly made their way inside. Summoning her bravery, she seamlessly integrated into the crowd, offering a courteous nod to an employee lost in thought. The grand lobby exuded elegance, adorned with shimmering marble accents, while a champagne fountain commanded attention at the center. Soft instrumental melodies flowed from a modest stage, creating an atmosphere of elegant festivity for the audience. Alyssa scanned the surroundings, her gaze flickering in search of Ethan's recognizable figure. Apprehension and excitement twisted within her gut. As she traversed the polished expanse, the gaze of impeccably attired onlookers brushed against her. She made an effort to stand tall against their watchful gaze. She kept reminding herself that this was for her children. She needed to forge ahead. She glided further into the hall, navigating through tall tables and groups of animated guests. Crystal chandeliers illuminate the room, casting a soft light that dances over meticulously styled hair and tailored suits. Every so often, a server gracefully moved through the space, presenting champagne or hors d'oeuvres. Alyssa graciously declined, her stomach too anxious for anything beyond a sip of water. She observed the silence that enveloped the space whenever a significant figure made their entrance. Finally, amidst a gathering of elegantly attired guests surrounding a dais, she spotted Ethan. Clad in a sleek black suit, he exuded confidence as he greeted a circle of seasoned executives with a firm handshake. In an instant, the recollection of his smile during the cruise enveloped her mind. Witnessing him in this refined setting was almost dreamlike, as if she had caught a glimpse of an entirely different facet of his character. Yet something in his expression still echoed the essence of the person she had shared that enchanting night of dancing with. Gathering her resolve, Alyssa navigated the crowd, skillfully sidestepping any watchful employees who could challenge her presence. Her heart pounded with such intensity that she feared it would echo in the ears of those around her. She crept nearer, just within earshot to grasp snippets of dialogue. References to growth initiatives, charitable endeavors, and significant financial agreements. This was the major stage. And yet, she reminded herself, he remained Ethan, the man who would soon be the father of her unborn children. She was entitled to have a conversation with him. She carefully chose her moment, waiting until he had just wrapped up a greeting with one executive and appeared momentarily available. As she slipped in behind him, her fingers brushed softly against his arm. He pivoted with an air of nonchalance, anticipating the presence of yet another socialite or esteemed figure. As their gazes locked, a spark of recognition ignited on his features. His calm demeanor wavered, and for a brief instant, he appeared truly taken aback, perhaps even pleased, to encounter her. "Alyssa," he murmured, barely audible. He glanced around, a hint of concern in his eyes, as if fearing someone might be listening in. She parted her lips, ready to share the truths she had long held inside, but just as the words began to form, a tuxedo-clad security guard materialized beside her. "Miss, I must kindly request that you step away," he said, his tone firm yet courteous. The murmurs of the gathering gradually faded as the other attendees picked up on the tension in the air. Another guard approached, positioning himself beside Alyssa. A wave of anxiety washed over her, yet she pushed ahead, yearning to articulate even a handful of words. "Ethan," she uttered hastily, her voice trembling. "It's time for a conversation. I have made every effort to get in touch with you. The focus is on the team." She was never able to complete it. The guards advanced, one gripping her arm, steering her decisively toward the exit. She sensed the hushed murmurs and caught the disapproving glances of bystanders who believed she was an unwelcome trespasser looking for conflict. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She turned her head, wishing for Ethan to step in, but a barrier of elegantly attired people surged before him, shoving him beyond her grasp. As she moved forward, a guard whispered directives into his radio, while another hurriedly guided her across the gleaming marble floor. Her feet faltered on the hem of her gown. She stole a final look at Ethan as he moved ahead, his face a canvas of inner turmoil. Did she really see concern reflected in his eyes? Or perhaps another option? She breathed his name once more, yet the throng had swelled, and before long, she was engulfed by the shifting mass of people and the relentless tide of security. A wave of helplessness engulfed her. She shouted for him, striving to make her voice rise above the noise, yet the guards had her restrained in a rush toward the exits. Just one more second, she pleaded in her mind. I just need to share the news about the babies with him. No opportunity like that ever presented itself. The brisk night air struck her sharply as they pushed her out into the open. The cameras kept flashing around the red carpet, yet the woman being escorted to the side entrance went unnoticed by the crowd. Alyssa's thoughts spun in a chaotic dance. Amidst it all, for just a fleeting moment, she had locked eyes with Ethan. A moment of surprise, perhaps acknowledgement, or a hint of remorse passed through the crowd, but it quickly disappeared behind the lines of executives and security staff. As the guards pull Alyssa away, her gaze meets Ethan's in a fleeting moment charged with disbelief, before he vanishes into the crowd of distinguished guests. Alyssa emerged into the brisk night air, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of being whisked away by security. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she was cast out before the affluent spectators, yet the ache in her heart was far more painful. The red carpet scene was coming to a close, with a handful of photographers still occupied with the task of packing away their gear. She halted at a comfortable distance from the entrance, disregarding the curious stares of those who lingered by the doors. In the distance, luxury vehicles whisked away elite patrons, all of them oblivious to her presence. Her breath came in uneven bursts, heart racing from the rush of the confrontation and the deep-seated disappointment eating away at her core. She was certain that Ethan had recognized her. In an instant, she found herself yanked away, encircled by guards, and he vanished into the throng. She pondered whether he had truly grasped her essence before she slipped away from his view. After a brief moment, she spotted a young man stepping out from behind one of the marble pillars close to the gala's side exit. He appeared to have stepped out after her, a lanyard with a corporate ID badge swaying from his neck. His expression was a blend of unease and caution. "Excuse me. Are you okay?" he inquired softly, stealing a brief look behind him to ensure that no one else was observing. Alyssa focused on calming her breath. I'm fine, she asserted, though her voice trembled. "May I ask who you are?" "I am employed by Mr. Davis's company," he remarked, casting a quick look at the ID badge as if to verify it. "I am merely a helper. I witnessed security guiding you out." A wave of optimism filled her heart. "Could you lend me a hand, please? I have been attempting to contact Ethan, Mr. Davis, for several weeks now. He disappeared after our..." She paused, aware of how absurd it could seem. "Our paths crossed on a cruise. It's intimate. Extremely intimate." The young man stole a glance over his shoulder at the gala doors, where a pair of security guards remained, surveying the surroundings. "He's a reserved individual," he murmured softly. "Many individuals attempt to. Indeed, they seek to connect with him for their personal interests." "I comprehend." Alyssa brought her hands together, striving to convey sincerity instead of desperation. "However, my intentions are not driven by financial gain or coercion. I have something significant that I need him to understand." His brow knitted in concentration. "I've heard whispers," he murmured, averting his eyes. "Individuals assert various things about him for immediate gain. The company specializes in handling cases related to alleged paternity frauds." Her heartbeat raced. "I'm not a fraud," she asserted. "Take a look at this." She reached into her purse and pulled out the small leather pouch, revealing the golden wristband marked with ED. In meticulous handwriting. He handed this to me, she murmured, though the details of how it had found its way into her hands were unclear. It either fell away that night or was forgotten at the bar. At first, I was unaware of his identity, but now I recognize its significance, and it's something I cannot let go of. The assistant regarded the wristband with a hint of skepticism. Alyssa observed the change in his expression, a faint trace of understanding flickering across his face. I can't promise anything, he replied softly. Typically, these issues are addressed through formal legal processes, but feel free to share your narrative. That's all I've been doing, she interjected, her voice quivering. Electronic correspondence. Telephonic conversations. I arrived in person and was asked to leave. Please, she paused, unsure of how much to disclose to someone she barely knew. Yet, what options were available to her? I'm expecting, she murmured gently. Accompanied by triplets. It unfolded on the cruise, and he has a right to know. The young man's expression stiffened under the gravity of her revelation. I can't, he shifted awkwardly. He is quite occupied, and matters like this tend to arise. You can't possibly grasp the level of caution we must exercise. However, pay attention. He dropped his voice even lower. I will relay a message to someone. Manage your expectations, but I assure you I will pay attention to it. He retrieved a business card from his pocket, jotted down a note on the back, and presented it to Alyssa. If you haven't received a response shortly, please reach out to this number. Before she had the chance to express her gratitude, he cast another look at the guards, who were now watching them with suspicion, and quickly retreated back inside. Alyssa clenched the card tightly in her shaking hand. She found herself caught in a swirl of emotions, uncertain whether to embrace relief, express gratitude, or simply acknowledge the persistent anxious tension that lingered. She questioned the legal department's approach, yet it was still an improvement over a simple dismissal. She let out a breath, her gaze sweeping the driveway for any trace of Ethan. Chauffeurs in tailored black suits stood poised beside polished vehicles, prepared to transport distinguished guests to their destinations. The crowd had thinned, yet her attention was drawn to a door that unexpectedly swung open on the side of the building. Ethan emerged, accompanied by a pair of imposing bodyguards. Her heart raced uncontrollably. She observed him scanning the surroundings, evidently on the lookout for something, or perhaps someone. Alyssa advanced without hesitation, skillfully navigating through the rows of parked cars. Ethan, she called, her voice carefully modulated to capture his attention without provoking any swift security response. He pivoted suddenly, a spark of recognition igniting in his gaze. For a brief instant, he appeared bewildered, caught in a dilemma between advancing or fleeing. Alyssa tightened her grip on the wristband and raised it a little, wishing for a glimpse. It's me, she murmured gently, taking a step closer. The lady you encountered during the voyage. He swallowed, tension radiating from him. It lingers in my mind. His tone conveyed a sense of recognition intertwined with careful consideration. The bodyguards moved in tighter, yet Ethan lifted a hand, conveying a silent message for them to hold back. I made every effort to contact you, she persisted, her heart pounding in her chest. I composed emails, I made calls, and I found myself utterly alone in my time of need. A look of bewilderment crossed his features. I had no idea, he remarked, his voice low and restrained. My team meticulously sifts through everything. She adjusted the golden wristband, allowing the moonlight to illuminate its gleaming surface. Does this seem recognizable? She inquired, her voice trembling. He gazed at it intently. Where did you obtain that? It had been forgotten at the bar on the ship the night we danced, she confessed, her feelings wavering between relief and dread. After that, you vanished. It wasn't until I returned home and began to connect the dots that I truly understood who you were. His posture stiffened, as if past recollections were battling against his meticulously curated reality. That cruise was meant to be a whispered getaway, he said softly. I pondered. He shook his head, his gaze flickering towards his bodyguards. Their cautious faces caused him to pause. She could perceive his unease, the intricate nature of his existence weighing on him. With a constriction in her throat, she inhaled deeply and pushed forth the words that demanded to be spoken. Ethan, I'm expecting a baby. The infants, 3 of them, belong to you. She felt uncertain about how to convey that news softly, yet the truth pressed heavily on her heart. Her eyes brimmed with unshed tears as she observed his expression transform from bewilderment to a semblance of shock. His eyes darted to her midsection before returning to her expression. For a moment, he stood frozen, as though the very breath had been drawn from his lungs. One of the bodyguards leaned in, clearly eager to guide Ethan away, but he remained steadfast, not moving right away. He sought the right expressions, yet they eluded him, refusing to flow smoothly. I'll arrange for someone to get in touch. Let's have a conversation. This is not the right location. His effort to maintain calm faltered, exposing a true glimmer of concern in his gaze. Please, Alyssa whispered, her cheeks wet with tears. I have no interest in your finances. I simply wish for you to be aware. His jaw clenched, and he offered a swift nod. I'll send someone, he asserted with greater conviction this time. He pivoted, moving toward a polished black car waiting at the edge of the street. The bodyguards encircled him, creating a shield of safety. Alyssa remained frozen in place, her gaze fixed on him as he slipped into the back seat. The vehicle glided away effortlessly, blending into the flow of traffic illuminated by the shimmering streetlights. In an instant, Ethan vanished once more, leaving her quaking on the pavement. She encircled her waist with her arms, her breath catching in her throat from the rush of adrenaline. A fragment of her spirit yearned for possibility. He had promised to reach out to her. That represented greater advancement than she had achieved in all her previous efforts, yet she couldn't shake the persistent anxiety that he might disappear forever. She lingered there for what felt like an eternity, her gaze fixed on the vacant spot where the car had recently occupied. Relief clashed with uncertainty in her thoughts. Perhaps this evening marked the initial stride towards understanding, or perhaps it was merely another fleeting view of a shut entrance. She brushed away her tears, reassuring herself that this was not the end. He had witnessed the evidence. She had shared the truth with him, even if just for a moment. That surely must hold some significance. With a measured pace, she collected her thoughts, her mind swirling with an overwhelming array of questions. She signaled for a taxi and settled into the back seat, letting herself relax as the driver drove off from the curb. Through the window, she observed the Gala building diminish, its dazzling lights no longer overwhelming her. She stands on the sidewalk, weary yet oddly optimistic that she has finally penetrated his frosty exterior. A mysterious late-night phone call from a blocked number echoes through Alyssa's apartment. She lifts it, her heart racing. Is it possible that Ethan is finally making contact? Alyssa's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, catching her off guard. As the clock approached midnight, she found herself cradling a warm cup of tea, seeking solace for her restless mind before surrendering to sleep. The caller ID displayed, blocked number. Her heart skipped a beat. Visions of the turmoil from the night before and the faint glimmer of hope in Ethan's gaze flooded my mind. She answered, her voice taut with expectation. Greetings. A thoughtful interlude. Then a calm male voice replied, Ms. Alyssa. I'm reaching out from Mr. Davis's office. She almost let the phone slip from her grasp in her relief, clutching it more firmly against her ear. Indeed, this is Alyssa. I have arrived. The gentleman cleared his throat. Mr. Davis has asked to meet with you in our legal department. We can schedule a date in the coming days. Do you have some time to chat? Alyssa's heart raced. After weeks of desperate searching, after all the evasion, the unanswered calls, the embarrassing incident at the gala, Ethan was finally taking action. "Indeed," she exclaimed hurriedly. "Absolutely, I'm here for you whenever you require my assistance." His voice held a steady tone, reminiscent of someone delivering lines from a carefully crafted script. "I will send you the details via email. Please bring along any relevant documentation you possess regarding your assertion." He lingered, allowing the words to float in the atmosphere. "We look forward to seeing you on Monday morning." Before Alyssa had the chance to inquire further, the connection abruptly cut off. She placed her phone on the counter, a blend of nervous anticipation and anxiety swirling within her. This was the moment. She would have the opportunity to confront Ethan once more. Yet, she was acutely aware, beneath the surface, that this encounter would lack warmth. The weekend that ensued dragged on, enveloped in a haze of restless anticipation. She meticulously searched her cozy apartment, gathering anything that could support her timeline: cruise tickets, emails to the cruise company, ultrasound printouts, and, naturally, the gold wristband engraved with ED. She discovered the art of practicing her words, striving to convey her narrative with poise, ensuring that the waves of frustration and heartbreak remained at bay. At times, the truth of her pregnancy would come crashing back, accompanied by surges of nausea that propelled her towards the open air. Every moment, she reaffirmed her resolve to battle not only for her own tranquility but also for the welfare of the 3 little lives blossoming within her. On a Monday morning, she made her way to the legal offices of the Davis Corporation. The structure loomed just as grandly as it had during her previous visit to its entrance. Shimmering sheets of glass, vigilant guards positioned at the entrances, workers hurrying with determined steps. Alyssa inhaled deeply and entered, thankful for the guidance her new friend from the Legal Aid Center had provided on maintaining composure in moments like this. A new receptionist, younger than the previous one, greeted her warmly and instructed her to take the elevator to the 20th floor. There she stood, greeted by a young woman in elegant attire who offered a courteous introduction, her gaze sweeping over Alyssa with a discerning assessment. They guided her into a conference room adorned with expansive windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. She had never experienced such an elevation before. The panorama nearly overwhelmed her senses. The furniture shone beneath the harsh glare of the overhead lights, which seemed almost overly intense. At one end of the lengthy table, Ethan sat, his body rigid, a wary look clouding his gaze. Next to him stood 2 distinguished gentlemen and a lady, all adorned in exquisitely tailored suits, their expressions marked by an air of composed professionalism. Alyssa swallowed hard, battling the instinct to run away. Ethan offered her no warmth in his greeting. He appeared to be deliberately avoiding her gaze, as if the intensity of a closer look could disrupt his calm demeanor. A suited man cleared his throat and gestured for Alyssa to take a seat across from them. She descended gradually, sensing the sturdy leather beneath her, and placed her well-used bag on her lap. An elderly attorney, with silver hair and wire-rimmed spectacles, was the first to speak. "Ms. Alyssa, thank you for coming in today." His tone was polite yet distant, reflecting the demeanor of someone who held numerous similar meetings each month. "We understand you have stated that Mr. Davis is the father of your unborn children. Is that accurate?" Alyssa's throat was parched. "Indeed. I thought I had communicated that clearly." He nodded. "However, we require the details. It is said that you encountered Mr. Davis in rather peculiar situations. A cruise, is that right?" Her gaze darted to Ethan, yet his face was a mask of indifference. She breathed out, resolute in her conviction. "I was fortunate enough to win a ticket for that cruise. It was on one of the party nights that I encountered Mr. Davis unexpectedly. We shared a dance. We spent time together. He departed before the trip concluded, and we failed to share any contact details." Another attorney, a woman with an incisive look, leaned in. "What makes you certain it was Mr. Davis you encountered?" Alyssa dug into her bag for the wristband. She endeavored to maintain a calm tone. I discovered this after he departed. It was left behind in a lounge area on the vessel. She angled it just right, allowing the engraved initials ED to glimmer in the light. It wasn't until I delved deeper that I uncovered his true identity. A whisper spread through the lawyers present. One carefully picked up the wristband for inspection. The man in wire-rimmed glasses turned to Ethan. "Mr. Davis, are you familiar with this item?" Ethan cast a fleeting look at the gold band. His jaw quivered slightly. "It seems known," he murmured, choosing not to expand. "Did you have any awareness of Ms. Alyssa's efforts to reach out to you?" Inquired the same individual, sifting through a stack of papers that Alyssa identified as duplicates of her emails. Ethan gave a slight shake of his head. "Not until recently. I have staff who screen these claims." The way he phrased it made Alyssa wince. "But once I laid eyes on her, I recalled that we had shared an evening on the ship." Alyssa felt a flush creep to her cheeks. She made an effort to mask her embarrassment. Just one evening, that was all he would acknowledge. That one evening had completely altered the course of her life. The interrogation persisted, with each attorney taking their turn to probe Alyssa about her personal history, her career, her financial situation, and any previous relationships. They were eager to uncover whether she had ever made similar claims, if she had any debts, or if she was entangled in any legal issues. The deliberate and careful examination of her personal matters made her feel vulnerable. She stole fleeting looks at Ethan, wishing he would intervene, but he stayed indifferent, occasionally signaling his lawyers with a nod as if to spur them on. At last, the female attorney set a polished folder on the table and pushed it toward Alyssa. "If you are truly convinced that these unborn children belong to Mr. Davis, we kindly request that you take a DNA test to establish paternity. We have established a partnership with a trusted laboratory. You'll need to sign the included forms, and after the tests are complete, we'll go over the next steps." The official, businesslike tone she used felt distant, but Alyssa braced herself. If that's what it requires for Ethan to take accountability, then absolutely, I have no secrets to conceal. She cast a quick look in his direction, resolute in her intention to prove that she had no intention of deceiving anyone. "But I'm not a fraud. I've been honest with you from the very beginning." His gaze darted to hers at that last remark, a brief glimpse of something disquieting lurking in his eyes. Before she could decipher it, the silver-haired attorney gestured dismissively. "Please take a moment to go over these documents, sign where necessary, and send them back. Once we have definitive evidence, we'll schedule a more in-depth conversation." He slid a pen across the table, and Alyssa gazed at it for a moment. Could this truly be unfolding? There she stood, amidst a sea of tailored suits, compelled to demonstrate her honesty before anyone would accept that she was telling the truth. She took a deep breath, determined not to break. With great deliberation, she lifted the pen and inscribed her name on each line. To attain the clarity she sought, she felt compelled to proceed. Once she finished, the woman rose, gathering the folder. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, we ask you not to make any mention of these claims publicly, for Mr. Davis's privacy and the reputation of his corporation." Alyssa's anger flared, but she held her tongue, knowing that any outburst now could jeopardize the fragile progress she'd achieved. The meeting ended abruptly, the lawyers collecting their briefcases and laptops with the precision of a finely tuned mechanism. Alyssa stood up from her chair, her legs a bit unsteady. Just outside the conference room, she hesitated, glancing back at Ethan. He remained by the window, hands buried in his pockets, his gaze still cautious. She inhaled deeply, gathering her resolve to speak to him openly. "Ethan, I trust you understand this goes beyond the test, it's about making the right choice." Her tone became gentler. "I never intended to catch you off guard, but these little ones," he turned, and for a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of the turmoil playing out in his expression. He nodded, delivering a somewhat awkward response. "We'll see what the tests say," he said softly. That was everything she received before the attorneys guided her away. She navigated the hallway toward the elevator, her mind a whirlpool of frustration and relief. Finally, there was movement, a break from the stagnation, and no more overlooked messages. A modest advancement, yet still a progression. In the days that ensued, she adhered to the legal team's guidance, making her way to the specified clinic and providing blood samples for the initial tests. The experience felt almost dreamlike, with medical forms displaying Ethan's name alongside hers, the soft buzz of lab equipment in the background as the technician detailed the expected duration of the procedures. She kept reminding herself that if science were on her side, Ethan would inevitably have to confront the reality. That evening, she found herself in solitude within her living room, gazing at the ultrasound photos affixed to the refrigerator door. The soft murmur of passing cars filtered in through the windows, while the gentle light of a solitary lamp cast a warm glow over her simple furnishings. A peculiar blend of serenity and unease washed over her. Before long, she would possess concrete, irrefutable evidence. In one way or another, her life was destined to change forever. In the stillness of the night, Alyssa receives a call from the medical lab. Ethan's team has expedited the tests, and results will be ready earlier than she anticipated. Alyssa perched on the edge of her bed, her gaze fixed on her phone. The lab technician's call earlier that afternoon had been brief and impersonal, affirming what she instinctively sensed within her. Ethan was, without a doubt, the father of her triplets. The initial test results indicated a nearly definitive match, more than sufficient to eliminate any remaining uncertainty regarding her assertion. Yet the confirmation left her feeling unsettled, as if the confines of her small apartment were tightening around her. She toyed with the strap of her bag, her heart a whirlwind of triumph and anxiety. She had consistently spoken the truth from the very beginning. Ethan could no longer ignore the truth. Yet she was aware that this evidence might ignite further discord rather than bring about a solution. It was as if a countdown had begun within her grasp. Even with the evidence now undeniable, she anticipated that Ethan's team would remain anything but courteous. A sudden gust of wind shook the windowpane, pulling her back from her reverie. She surveyed her humble living room, reminding herself to stay resilient. She was battling not only for her own sake but also for 3 young souls who yearned for a father's recognition. With a deep breath, she called the legal firm managing Ethan's affairs, her stomach twisting with each ring. At last, a sharp voice responded. "Good afternoon, Ms. Alyssa," the woman on the other end said, her tone more cautious than warm. "The initial DNA findings from the lab have arrived. Are you ready to delve into them?" She cleared her throat, attempting to regain control over her voice. "Indeed, I am. I'm eager to understand what the next steps are." A brief moment of silence lingered. "A formal meeting will be arranged for you and Mr. Davis to go over the final documentation. Our office will reach out with a date soon." There were no heartfelt congratulations, no courteous expressions of sympathy for the tumult of feelings she must be experiencing. The dialogue concluded with a terse farewell. Alyssa gazed at the still phone. She was completely unaware of how Ethan might respond, whether he would be taken aback, feel a sense of relief, or express anger. Her thoughts echoed the instant at the gala when she noticed genuine turmoil in his gaze, as if he were caught between the desire to assist and the urge to flee. With the truth finally revealed, would he choose to embrace vulnerability or fortify his defenses even more? A few days later, she found herself once again in the familiar glass tower, though this time in a smaller, more subdued conference room. The blinds hung at an angle, allowing a dreary glow of urban illumination to seep through. Across the table sat Ethan, accompanied by the same 2 attorneys who had interrogated her. He appeared even more aloof than previously, the typical assurance in his stance coming across as contrived. She pondered whether he had found any rest recently, or if he was grappling with the realization that he couldn't emerge from this predicament unhurt. The seasoned attorney, distinguished by his silver hair, unfurled a folder on the table. "Ms. Alyssa, the final test results indicate a 99% likelihood that Mr. Davis is, in fact, the father. He stole a look at Ethan, who remained fixated on the ground. Let us proceed to the subsequent stage of our conversation. Now, reflecting on the possible consequences of this, we must emphasize that any public revelation— Hold on a moment. Alyssa interrupted. She gazed at Ethan, gathering her resolve. The evidence is in your hands. I assure you, I'm being truthful. Will you take action, or must I continue to strive for your focus? His head rose, and she glimpsed a fleeting moment of vulnerability before he regained his composure. I never claimed you were being dishonest, he said softly. There's so much to take in. She experienced a tumultuous clash of anger and relief. You disappeared after the cruise, she said, her voice quivering slightly. You abandoned me without a means to contact you, and I discovered I was expecting triplets all on my own. Ethan adjusted himself in his chair, exhaling softly. I was called away on business, he replied, but the excuse felt unconvincing. I truly had no idea that I had encountered someone who would transform my life in such a profound way. With a composed demeanor, his attorneys stepped in, steering the dialogue towards the essential aspects of assistance and discretion. Alyssa found it excruciating to endure. Terms such as monthly installments, non-disclosure agreements, and safeguarding brand image left her feeling more like a burden than an expectant mother of 3 cherished lives. She struggled to keep her frustration in check, yet each rigid word they uttered struck at her sense of self-worth. Halfway through the meeting, a shift occurred in Ethan's demeanor. He signaled for his attorneys to halt, then faced Alyssa squarely. I need more evidence, he said, his voice tight with tension. I understand the evidence is clear, but I require some time to contemplate our approach to this matter. Can you take care of this? She resonated, her heart constricting. We're discussing children, Ethan, not a business deal you can simply shift away from. He swallowed hard, gazing at her as if he were on the verge of voicing his dissent. Yet he nodded, a shroud of frustration and uncertainty shadowing his gaze. The attorneys shared knowing looks, seamlessly progressing in their dialogue about the forthcoming actions as if following a well-rehearsed script. Alyssa was overwhelmed by the starkness of it all. Yet, she continued to remind herself that validation was a step forward. With the tests firmly in her possession, Ethan found himself unable to disregard or refute her once more. As the meeting came to a close, one of the attorneys pushed a pile of papers across the table. Kindly ensure you go through these carefully, he instructed. They detailed specific stipulations concerning public disclosure, possible financial agreements, and additional medical oversight. Upon your signature, we can proceed to finalize the initial agreement. Her stomach twisted at the idea of signing, yet she also feared the looming burden of legal fees or courtroom conflicts if she chose to decline. She sought safety for the little ones, even if it required entering a realm of legal limitations. She collected the papers, her silence conveying understanding. Ethan remained in the room, his lawyers having departed, his stance unyielding. Alyssa, he murmured, his voice softer now. It was never my intention to bring you this kind of stress. The story of my existence. The situation is intricate. However, it's important for you to understand. He paused, sealing his lips in contemplation. I believe you are being truthful. I seek understanding, and I aim to safeguard what I have created. She gazed at him, struggling to hold back her tears. Your empire holds little significance for me. I simply wish to ensure that my children have a father who genuinely cares. He nodded, his eyes falling to the ground. I'll do what's right, he said, though his tone hinted at his ongoing struggle to define what that truly entailed. Shortly thereafter, he emerged into the hallway, leaving her solitary in the conference room, the city skyline shimmering through the windows as if it were a quiet spectator. Outside the building, she realized the tension lingered, unresolved and palpable. She had scarcely taken 10 steps from the lobby doors when a man in a dark suit approached her, his expression unreadable. Before she had a chance to respond, he murmured softly. "I recommend that you align yourself with the terms proposed by Mr. Davis's team," he said, a dangerous glimmer flickering in his eyes. "It would be regrettable if whispers spread regarding you presenting untruths. Such occurrences can lead to the downfall of individuals." Alyssa's breath caught in her throat. "I'm not making false claims," she asserted, striving to maintain her composure. The results of the paternity test were definitive. He flashed a predatory grin. "Indeed, not everyone requires insight into every single aspect, do they? It would be prudent for you to remain quiet. A calm decision is preferable. For all." As he turned and disappeared into the throng of pedestrians, Alyssa's hands clenched into tight fists. The danger was clear enough. A surge of anger washed over her, fueled by her own feelings and the future of her unborn children. What could they possibly conceal or dread if the truth was in her favor? That night, she was unable to dispel the unsettling anxiety his words had stirred within her. She meticulously verified the security of her apartment door, ensuring that the locks were firmly in place. Even in her weariness, a sense of restlessness consumed her, each faint sound from the hallway causing her to startle. As the clock struck midnight, she finally found herself drifting into slumber on the couch. She stirred from her slumber at the gentle whisper of movement, her eyes fluttering open in bewilderment. The hallway beyond her apartment was still, yet a narrow beam of light spilling from beneath the door hinted at the presence of an envelope that had mysteriously appeared. With her heart racing, she sank to the floor and retrieved the envelope tucked away inside. It was stark, devoid of any labels, lacking a name or postage, emanating an ominous presence. With quivering hands, she ripped it apart. A sheet of paper, inscribed in a stark and unfeeling typeface, conveyed a direct and unyielding demand. "Cease all demands or you will encounter significant legal and personal consequences." Her throat constricted, her stomach churning. She was uncertain about the identity of the sender. Perhaps there exists an individual within Ethan's inner circle, driven by a fear of scandal, or a maverick associate determined to safeguard his reputation at all costs. That evening, a plain envelope is slid under Alyssa's door, bearing a stern ultimatum. As she carefully opens it, her heart pounds in her chest, and she comes to the unsettling realization that she has been cautioned to keep quiet. Or else. Alyssa gazed at the ominous letter affixed to her kitchen counter, its harsh, chilling words cautioning her to remain silent or face dire repercussions. Since discovering it slipped beneath her door, sleep had eluded her, and her nerves were frayed to the breaking point. With each unfamiliar creak echoing through the hallway, she flinched, a nagging belief that someone was observing her creeping into her mind. The correspondence lacked a return address and any identifying name. It bore a stark warning to retreat from her quest for Ethan Davis's recognition. Or else. As her phone buzzed in the mid-morning light, a wave of dread washed over her, anticipating yet another piece of unwelcome news. She allowed it to buzz for a few moments, gathering her courage before answering with a trembling breath. A smooth, composed voice on the other end greeted, "Good morning, Ms. Alyssa. I am reaching out on behalf of Ethan Davis. He would like to have a face-to-face conversation with you. Today, if it can be arranged." The speaker conveyed a sense of professionalism, maintaining a balanced and impartial tone. Alyssa's heart raced, yet she maintained a calm tone. "Absolutely, I can be available. Where might I venture?" The response indicated a preference for a meeting at your home. "He believes it would provide you with greater comfort." She hesitated. The thought of Ethan arriving at her humble apartment stirred a mix of fear and unexpected solace within her. However, considering the pressure she had been under, it was preferable to avoid entering his domain once more. "Very well," she conceded gently. "When will it be?" "The sun begins its descent in the late afternoon." The assistant replied, "I'll text you the details," before ending the call. Alyssa placed her phone down, releasing a shaky breath. Ethan was certainly trying, but she was skeptical that it would be an easy, smooth reunion. A mix of relief and anxiety washed over her as she looked down at her small belly, where 3 developing lives served as a poignant reminder of what was at stake. Regardless of the circumstances, she needed to maintain her strength. For them. Time dragged on slowly. She moved restlessly through her living room, engaging in minor efforts to organize her space, folding a blanket, aligning a stack of mail, and rearranging the cushions. A wave of vulnerability twisted in her stomach at the idea of him entering her realm. Would he look down on her tattered sofa, or the peeling paint on her walls? She reassured herself that his opinion of her simple existence was of no consequence. The infants were genuine, and that was all the motivation she required to hold her head high. At last, a knock echoed through the silence, and she swung the door open to reveal Ethan, solitary in the softly illuminated corridor. He donned a tailored coat, yet underneath, he appeared somewhat weary, as if sleep had slipped through his fingers. His eyes darted through the corridor, finally resting on her with a wary look. "May I enter?" he inquired softly. Gone was the assured facade he had displayed during corporate meetings and the gala. She nodded, retreating slightly to allow him to move forward. The door shut softly behind them, accompanied by a gentle click. He examined her living space, his stance taut yet open-minded. She attempted to discern whether he perceived the apartment as cramped or stifling in contrast to his opulent lifestyle, yet he remained silent, navigating the space in an uncomfortable hush until he arrived at the heart of the living room. He then pivoted to meet her gaze. "Apologies for the abruptness." As he arrived, he started to rub the back of his neck, "but I wanted to have a conversation with you free from the presence of lawyers." He cast a wary look at the small table where the foreboding letter remained, its edges still creased, his brow knitted in concern. "Something occurred, didn't it?" Alyssa pressed her lips together, battling a wave of irritation. "Could you clarify what you mean?" He shook his head, moving in closer. "I've been exploring some details," he remarked, his tone subdued. "I engaged a private investigator to delve into your background, history, finances, and all pertinent details. I had to confirm that you weren't. You weren't trying to deceive me." A fleeting shadow of remorse flickered across his expression. "What I've come to understand is that you've been truthful. The narratives, the chronology, your challenges, you were always truthful." Alyssa's eyes burned with fury, though a tiny fragment of her sensed a measure of validation. "So you trusted your advisor's deceitful claims that I was merely a con artist," she remarked, folding her arms tightly across her chest. "It seems that simpler than placing your faith in the individual who is nurturing your offspring." He averted his gaze for a brief instant, his jaw clenched. "I understand. I apologize." He let out a breath, his shoulders drooping. "I couldn't accept that I turned my back on something so significant. The story of my existence. My enterprise. Individuals often attempt to deceive me for financial gain or to gain attention. It has shaped me. Questionable. Perhaps overly cautious." She observed him closely, catching the authentic shame that danced in his eyes. "And now," she inquired, steadfast in her determination not to concede easily. "Now," he spoke gently, "I understand you're not that individual. You were never that." He noticed the letter resting on the table. "Could it possibly be what I suspect it to be?" He extended his hand softly, examining the biting remarks. His lips pressed together into a stern line. "Who is the sender of this?" Alyssa shrugged, a look of helplessness crossing her face. "I'm uncertain. This isn't the initial threat. Your legal team is urging me to remain silent and to sign non-disclosure agreements. Moreover, there are whispers from some men in suits suggesting that I ought to take a step back. One of them nearly trapped me outside your building." Ethan muttered a curse softly to himself. "My advisors have crossed the line. They believe they are safeguarding me. My creation. My representation." He placed the letter down gently. "I will take care of them. It is unacceptable for anyone to make threats against you. She held her tongue, resisting the urge to point out that he could have avoided this if he had taken action earlier. Instead, she inquired with a sharp tone, "So, what will you do about it?" He gazed at her, fully grasping the significance of her inquiry. "I'm going to clean house," he replied, a firm determination sharpening his voice. "Anyone who has crossed that boundary must be eliminated. I will not accept it." Alyssa brushed her hand across her abdomen, contemplating the tumultuous future that awaited her. "I'm still expecting triplets, Ethan. I find it unbearable to deal with ongoing threats or a legal battle. I require protection. I must be certain that you won't disappear once more." He nodded, moving nearer, as if seeking to close the distance that separated them. "I shall not. I assure you." His voice took on a gentler quality. "I understand that an apology can't change your experiences, but I am committed to making things right. I had one of my investigators thoroughly examine the individuals in my circle, including my close associates and lawyers, and I uncovered numerous dubious intentions." Alyssa felt a constriction in her chest as she pondered the intricate and multifaceted nature of his existence. "I can't enter your realm if I'm constantly under siege," she murmured, "and I can't nurture these little ones by myself." His eyes drifted to her abdomen, where the subtle curve had become more pronounced. "I comprehend." He inhaled deeply, as if bracing himself for a revelation. "I truly wish things had not unfolded like this. I had feelings for you. That evening aboard the cruise, I experienced a sense of authenticity that had eluded me for quite some time. Then my father's health crisis compelled me to depart suddenly, and from that point on, everything unraveled. I intended to connect, yet fear of being misled held me back, leading me to heed the wrong voices." A wave of melancholy washed over her. A portion of her had faith in him. She had felt the depth of his honesty that evening. "I'm not a mystery for you to unravel with a detective," she responded, her voice trembling. "We must discuss the little ones and our plans for the future." He parted his lips to reply, yet an unexpected tremor resonated through the atmosphere. Alyssa noticed the persistent buzzing of his phone, tucked away in the pocket of his coat. He cast a quick look at the screen, his eyebrows knitting together in concern. "One of my associates," he murmured, retreating slightly. "This is something I must take." She remained in a taut stillness, observing him as he moved restlessly by the window. His expression was unyielding, and his tone was sharp. It was clear that something significant had transpired. He terminated the call, releasing a sharp breath, his complexion ashen. "What seems to be the issue?" she inquired, steeling herself. He forcefully tucked the phone into his pocket. "One of our major investors has just withdrawn, stating they discovered proof of fraudulent activity within my company. It seems to be making headlines everywhere. A controversy linked to shipping agreements." A glimmer of fear danced in his eyes. "If this is accurate, it has the potential to obliterate everything. The whole of my dominion." Alyssa sensed her heartbeat quicken. "Does this relate to your advisors? Or the ones who made threats against me?" Ethan gave a slight shake of his head. "I'm still uncertain. However, if the media catches wind of our dispute over paternity concurrently, they'll twist the narrative and amplify the controversy." He gulped. "Everything is coming apart." Alyssa placed a hand on her temple, struggling to grasp the chaos enveloping them. A part of her yearned to retaliate, to make it clear that none of this chaos would have unfolded had he chosen honesty from the very beginning. Yet the sheer terror reflected in his gaze restrained her. A phone call breaks the intensity of their fervent debate. A close associate of Ethan's bursts in, urgently revealing a significant scandal that jeopardizes not just Ethan's empire but also Alyssa's delicate hope for a semblance of normalcy. Alyssa perched in the passenger seat of Ethan's car, her foot rhythmically tapping against the floor mat as they navigated the bustling city streets. She could still sense the tension emanating from him since the phone call that disrupted the delicate balance they had worked so hard to establish. A scandal had been meticulously crafted by someone within his empire, a scandal so significant that it threatened to drive away investors and cast doubt over his entire company. With the paternity drama poised to erupt in the headlines, it seemed as if they were precariously balanced on the brink of a precipice. Ethan's fingers curled around the steering wheel with increasing intensity. He whispered that the board was insisting on an emergency meeting. They seek to interrogate me regarding the allegations of fraud and to ascertain the veracity of the rumors surrounding my personal life. Alyssa cast him a concerned look. Are they going to expel you from your own business? He let out a breath, his eyes locked on the path ahead. If there's sufficient information to portray me as inept or untrustworthy, they could very well do so. My father created this business from nothing. I never thought it would reach this point. A furrow formed between his brows, an intensity that cut deeper than the strain she had witnessed previously. However, we will find a solution. It is essential that we proceed. I refuse to allow these children to be caught up in a situation that I could have avoided. The corporate headquarters loomed above the surrounding structures, its reflective glass shimmering under the overcast sky. Ethan drove into the underground parking garage, his designated space clear, save for a handful of black SUVs that twisted a knot of unease in Alyssa's stomach. The security guards immediately recognized Ethan, gesturing for them to pass through. They entered a private elevator, which ascended with a mechanical hum directly to a secluded floor. They stepped into a vast area adorned with gleaming tiles and softly colored walls. The silence enveloped the space, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. The familiar hum of corporate activity had shifted into a charged, expectant quiet. A modest assembly had formed outside the boardroom, every expression marked by concern or distrust. As Ethan appeared, the group split apart like a wave, eager to witness how he would tackle the unfolding crisis. The imposing boardroom doors stood before me, their frosted glass panels concealing the tense exchange taking place inside. Alyssa paused, uncertain if she had the right to engage in the impending confrontation. Noticing her discomfort, Ethan turned slightly and softly caressed her arm. "Please come," he said softly, "if you think you can manage it." She nodded, gathering her courage. "I won't abandon you in there." The heavy doors creaked open, unveiling a lengthy table encircled by individuals clad in suits so pristine they appeared to have been pressed onto their forms. The hushed whispers faded away the moment Ethan entered, with Alyssa trailing closely behind him. At the far end of the table sat a man with a stern expression, one she recalled from a prior meeting, an advisor who had been quick to dismiss her assertions regarding the babies. "Ethan," that man started, his tone measured. "We require clarity." He cast a disapproving glance at Alyssa before returning his gaze. "Allegations regarding deceptive shipping contracts are flooding in. We've lost a significant investor in the past day, and now whispers of a personal scandal surrounding you, and that's enough." Ethan interjected sharply, interrupting him. He flung a pile of papers onto the table, where they spread out for all to observe. "Here are the declarations from our finance team that demonstrate valid transactions. Any fraudulent documents that are being circulated did not originate from me or from any official authorized by my office." His voice brimmed with a barely contained rage. "There's a mole among us, crafting false documents to tarnish our reputation. I suspect this individual is also behind the malicious rumors about my personal life, aiming to create chaos at the most inopportune moment." A tense whisper spread through the gathering. Alyssa positioned herself next to Ethan, her arms folded protectively over the gentle swell of her abdomen. She sensed the doubt directed at her, from the older, gray-haired executives who appeared to begrudge her presence, to the younger ones who regarded her with cautious intrigue. A woman clad in a navy blazer leaned in, making a subtle adjustment to her glasses. "Mr. Davis, could you share any evidence regarding who may be responsible for this sabotage?" Ethan extended his hand toward a folder that had escaped Alyssa's attention. He opened it, unveiling a collection of photocopied emails and signature pages, adorned with times and dates hastily scribbled in the margins. A private investigator compared these to the official company records, he explained. Anomalies were identified, especially within the realm of shipping contracts. Several documents bore the signature of an executive who was reportedly abroad at the time they were dated. He took a moment, surveying the expressions around the table. "I'm not ready to reveal any names just yet," he remarked, the tension palpable in his voice, "but I have my suspicions." Alyssa's gaze wandered to the advisor, whose expression was as unyielding as stone. She noticed the slightest quiver in his jaw. He cast her a piercing look, as if to warn her to tread carefully. She trembled. The board buzzed with whispers once more. At last, one of the senior members rapped his knuckles on the table, calling for silence. He announced that a special committee would be formed to investigate these documents without delay. "For now, Ethan, you remain in the CEO position, but it's essential to proceed with caution. The media is hovering ominously, and even the slightest hint of vulnerability could jeopardize our stock value." Ethan nodded, his expression somber. "I comprehend." He shut his folder and inhaled deeply. He added one more thing, casting a brief sideways glance at Alyssa. "I won't conceal anything about my personal life. Ms. Alyssa is anticipating my children. It's simply a matter of two individuals navigating their obligations, nothing more intriguing than that." A brief moment of astonishment passed over several expressions. Some stayed in a daze. Yet, the acknowledgement seemed to her like a modest triumph. At least he was no longer dismissing her now. With no more formalities, the board concluded the meeting, keen to gather and strategize on damage control. Ethan led Alyssa from the room, his hand lightly brushing against her back. She felt the weight of the intense gazes trailing behind them, yet he appeared unfazed by the attention. The sound of footsteps reverberated through the hallway. Out of nowhere, a man clad in a suit that seemed far too costly for his rigid demeanor hurriedly approached. "Mr. Davis," he said, managing a courteous smile that failed to illuminate his gaze. "It's essential to solidify our key messages before you make any public announcement regarding this matter." He shot a subtly concealed look in Alyssa's direction. Ethan's tone was sharp. "I will manage my own talking points." He wrapped an arm around Alyssa's shoulders, a move that caught the man off guard, causing him to step back in astonishment. Initially, she tensed, but gradually allowed herself to lean into him a bit. The mounting pressure of the day, along with the preceding weeks, loomed over her, ready to engulf her completely. A moment of tranquility was essential for her. He led her into a secluded conference room and shut the door behind them. They remained quiet, surrounded by the sweeping view of the city skyline. She gazed at him, observing the concern carved into his expression. "Thank you," she whispered, "for revealing the truth about us and the little ones in front of everyone." His expression became gentler, yet the burden of stress lingered in his gaze. "I ought to have taken care of that much earlier," he remarked. Yet, fear gripped me. Fearful of treachery, of watching all I've created slip away. He let out a shaky breath. "Now I realize that allowing others to control me almost robbed me of the opportunity to truly connect with my own children." She gently glided her hand across her belly. "They'll be fortunate to have you in their lives if you can protect them from everything. This." She waved her hand toward the transparent barriers, the workspace beyond, the intricate web of business drama unfolding around them. His jaw clenched. "I will track down the person responsible for leaking those fraudulent contracts, and I will ensure that no one ever threatens you again." He moved in closer, allowing his hand to gently cover hers as it rested on her stomach. It was a hesitant move, as if he was still discovering the art of opening up. "Is it possible for us to solve this, Alyssa?" he inquired softly. "How can we maintain our family bond amidst all this chaos?" Tears welled in her eyes, a bittersweet release more than anything else. "I want that," she whispered, her voice quivering under the weight of the revelation. "Trust is not built in a day. You must demonstrate that I am not solitary in this matter." He nodded, resolve igniting in his eyes. "I shall." Before either had the chance to utter another word, the door swung open with a sudden force. One of Ethan's assistants entered, looking visibly shaken. "My apologies, sir," the assistant exclaimed, her words spilling out in a hurried stream. "I have been attempting to get in touch with you. A call just came in from the hospital, specifically from Ms. Alyssa's obstetrician's office. An urgent matter arose during her routine checkup, concerning the triplets." Alyssa's chest tightened with alarm. She advanced, her voice trembling. "What transpired? Are they all right?" The assistant shook their head, filled with doubt. "Your presence is required there without delay. Ethan is quick to act." He nods, holding Alyssa's hand tightly. They rush out of the room, their hurried footsteps echoing through the corridors. In that fleeting moment, the scandal, the sabotage, the intrigue faded into insignificance, overshadowed by the urgent need to safeguard the lives they had only just begun to defend. Ethan gets a call from the hospital. Alyssa's routine prenatal checkup has taken on a sense of urgency. The triplets may face complications, requiring urgent medical care. Alyssa's heart raced as she rushed beside Ethan through the bustling hospital hallway. The harsh fluorescent lights above only heightened her anxiety. Nurses and doctors hurried past, their voices drowned out by the thunderous beat of her own heart. She grasped Ethan's hand firmly, striving to rein in the storm of frantic thoughts swirling in her mind. What if the infants are at risk? What if something went awry and she remained oblivious? He led her to the maternity wing, where a nurse intercepted them at a pair of double doors. The nurse provided a warm smile of understanding before guiding them into the ultrasound room. Within the confines of the room, a gentle beep of machinery resonated throughout the atmosphere. Alyssa spotted her obstetrician, Dr. Fletcher, who had been overseeing her pregnancy since the beginning. The doctor's demeanor was grave, yet still compassionate. "Thank you for arriving so promptly," Dr. Fletcher murmured softly. A concern arose during the routine scan. "A potential complication has come to our attention regarding one of the triplets, indicating a possibility of restricted growth or diminished fluid levels. We should examine this more thoroughly." Alyssa's breath caught in her throat. His hand rested gently on her shoulder, offering a comforting warmth that she longed for. With great care, she positioned herself on the examination table, her heart racing as the doctor readied the ultrasound machine. She looked at Ethan, and even with the tightness in his jaw, he gave a slight nod that conveyed, "I'm here." In an instant, the screen sprang to life, revealing the silhouettes of three small figures. The physician maneuvered the probe with precision, articulating the observations in a steady, composed manner: heartbeat patterns, fluid levels, placentas. Alyssa felt a knot in her chest with each pause, dreading that the doctor might utter something devastating. Instead, Dr. Fletcher released a gentle exhale. Dr. Fletcher explained that the initial alert appeared to be a false alarm or a misreading, her voice carrying a sense of relief. All three infants exhibit stable heart rates. The fluid levels appear to be within acceptable ranges. We will monitor the situation closely, but at this moment, it seems there is no pressing threat. Alyssa's shoulders drooped in a moment of relief, her eyes glistening with the weight of unshed tears. She glanced at Ethan, who released a slow breath, as though he had been holding it in all along. He tenderly cupped her cheek with his hand. "Thank you, doctor," he whispered, his voice heavy with feeling. "We are deeply appreciative." Dr. Fletcher presented a comforting smile. "Stay consistent with your prenatal vitamins, manage stress as effectively as possible, and ensure you get plenty of rest. Right now, the last thing you want is stress." Alyssa released a tremulous chuckle. "I'll do my best," she whispered, fully aware that in their present circumstances, stress was almost unavoidable. After the doctor concluded, she and Ethan retreated to the hallway, each wave of relief leading to the next inquiry. What comes next? A serene nook was discovered close to the main lobby of the hospital. A grand window stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of a courtyard where trees whispered gently in the soft breeze. The earlier chaos of the day seemed subdued under the steady buzz of the fluorescent lights. Alyssa placed a hand on her belly, overwhelmed with gratitude that her little ones were safe and sound. Ethan rested against the window, his gaze wandering into the distance for a brief moment. He confessed, his voice low, that he feared he would lose it all. This opportunity is not solely about my company, it encompasses the bond one share with you and the little ones. The phone call left him shaking his head. It illuminated the entire situation. All the corporate drama pales in comparison to the well-being of our children. She nodded, moving in closer until their shoulders brushed against each other. She gently reminded him that they still needed to address that drama. There are obstacles lurking in the shadows, attempting to undermine you, to undermine us, and we cannot simply ignore them, hoping they will vanish on their own. His eyes steeled with determination. Indeed, he concurred. I will uncover the identity of those accountable. I harbor a compelling suspicion regarding the identity of this individual, someone who is close enough to observe my every action. They twisted the shipping contracts, disseminated misleading information to intimidate our investors, and weaponized my personal life against me. Now that I have uncovered the truth, I am ready to face them directly. She intertwined her fingers with his. I'm with you, she declared, her sincerity evident in every syllable. I refuse to be consumed by the anxiety of what might come next or the unsettling surprise of a note slipped beneath my door. We tackle it as a team. Inspired by her unity, Ethan reached out to intertwine their fingers. His demeanor became gentler. Thank you, he murmured. Your understanding of its significance is truly profound. Just as they were about to continue, Ethan's phone vibrated. He looked down, scanning a brief message that caused his lips to tighten into a narrow line. He explained with a somber tone that an urgent board meeting had been called. I have a strong feeling that my main advisor, who is probably the one orchestrating the sabotage, will be present. She could feel the fury bubbling just below his composed surface. Let's proceed. The journey back to headquarters was almost dreamlike, yet Ethan appeared strangely composed, resembling someone who had finally found their sense of purpose. Alyssa found strength in his unwavering presence. Upon entering the boardroom, they sensed a palpable tension in the air. In a shadowy corner, a man whom Alyssa identified as one of Ethan's leading advisors paced with palpable anxiety, the very same individual who had sown seeds of doubt about her, circulated whispers, and repeatedly shot her glances filled with overt animosity. Ethan cleared his throat, capturing everyone's attention. I hope everyone has had a chance to review the most recent figures. He inquired, letting a folder fall onto the table. The evidence indicates that the shipping fraud was channeled through a shell company, and I suspect that a particular member of my team set up that shell company for their own benefit. The atmosphere in the room thickened with anticipation. The advisor halted their restless movements, their complexion drained of color. Ethan, this is a miscommunication, he asserted, glancing around for validation. It's hard to fathom these accusations. Yet Ethan stood firm. Your manipulations led me to doubt a woman who is carrying my children, making me contemplate excluding her from my life. You wanted me to view her as a fraud while you were the one pulling the strings of a deception right in front of me. The advisor's jaw tightened. The others in the room fixed their gazes on him, understanding slowly creeping in. A handful of board members shared hushed murmurs, fully aware that the evidence loomed too large to be mere chance. Ethan allowed the silence to linger before giving a nod to the security guard stationed by the door. He commanded, his tone steady, escort him out. We will be pursuing legal action, and I have no doubt that the authorities will find these documents persuasive. Alyssa observed the advisor's attempts to bluster, yet the guards had already closed in. In mere moments, he was whisked away from the room, his cries reverberating through the corridor. A soft silence enveloped the room, soon giving way to a gentle wave of relief that passed among the gathered individuals. An elder member of the board rose, preparing to speak as he cleared his throat. Mr. Davis, it is imperative that we promptly release a statement to clarify the details of the fraud and clear your name of any wrongdoing. I agree, Ethan replied, letting out a breath as if a heavy burden had been released. I appreciate your collaboration. I will personally address any media inquiries related to my private life. My children will not become just another story in the news. Alyssa experienced a wave of admiration for him. After enduring all the doubt, he was resolutely standing up for what truly mattered, the truth and his family. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a profound weariness enveloped Alyssa, sinking deep into her very being. She reclined on Ethan's couch in his penthouse, the city lights shimmering through the expansive windows. The stillness that enveloped the space seemed almost surreal in contrast to the earlier tumult. Ethan settled next to her, meticulously examining a pile of documents outlining the forthcoming actions, press releases, legal measures against the fallen advisor, and financial restructuring plans. She placed a hand on her belly, sensing a gentle flutter within. The infants appeared more serene, as if they grasped at the most tumultuous part of the tempest could be behind them. She murmured in disbelief at how swiftly everything transformed, from looming lawsuits to the specter of criminal charges. Ethan placed the papers down and turned his gaze toward her, fatigue blending with a soft affection. Changes were necessary, he stated. If not for that, I would have lost it all. You revealed that to me. She adjusted her position, locking her gaze with his. I never intended to disrupt your life. At times, it's necessary to dismantle what exists in order to create something new, wouldn't you agree? He confessed, drawing nearer. If we are to rebuild, I wish for us to do it as a team. Her throat constricted, the first hints of tears stinging at the edges. It's hard to fathom how we found ourselves in this place, she admitted quietly. Every week spent in pursuit of you, the anguish of believing you'd vanished for good. Now we find ourselves discussing the journey of raising 3 children. He caressed her cheek softly with his hand. That evening aboard the cruise, I experienced an indescribable feeling, as if I could finally embrace my true self. Life and fear intervened, yet the memory remained vivid. She allowed him to grasp her hand, her heart overflowing with a mix of fragility and optimism. Nor did I, she murmured. In that instant, she understood that a future awaited them, one where trust would overshadow all doubt, where their children would thrive with both parents by their side, united in purpose. In the ensuing days, the media seized upon the story of the shipping fraud, generating a whirlwind of speculation regarding the mastermind behind it and the fate that awaited Ethan Davis's empire. However, due to a prompt inquiry in Ethan's openness, the public's focus shifted away from the paternity issue. True to his promise, Ethan employed every means available to protect Alyssa from the relentless gaze of reporters. Whenever they made their entrance, he remained by her side, composed and devoted, demonstrating to everyone that she was neither a gold digger nor a fleeting romance. Before long, the media discovered a fresh story to pursue, and the scandal that had once loomed large faded into mere background chatter. Alyssa embraced her pregnancy, attending appointments with a newfound sense of calm that replaced the anxiety she once felt. Ethan frequently joined her, eager to absorb each heartbeat and every fresh detail the doctors revealed. He persuaded her to abandon her cozy apartment and move into a safe residence with him, at least until the triplets made their entrance. Though she was initially reluctant, she came to see the practicality of the situation. His residence provided greater room and security than her confined apartment, and she felt a warmth in her heart at his enthusiasm to create a shared living space. They established fresh patterns. Mornings unfolded with soothing herbal tea, as Alyssa's doctor advised steering clear of caffeine, while tranquil evenings were spent contemplating possible baby names. Their relationship faced challenges, navigating the complexities of blending their contrasting lifestyles and dealing with conflicts arising from unresolved trust issues. Yet, each moment dedicated to navigating those obstacles seemed like a stride toward the family they had never envisioned, but both had grown to hold dear. On a radiant afternoon, with her belly undeniably round, Ethan caught Alyssa off guard by proposing a brief escape for some relaxation. "Not too far," he mentioned, "just a day trip aboard one of my company's smaller yachts, with fresh air and tranquil waters." She paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Visions of that inaugural voyage twirled through her thoughts, a blend of magic and sorrow, yet in the end, she acquiesced with a gentle smile. Perhaps this time, a journey by boat could signify a fresh beginning rather than a conclusion. At dawn, they stood together on the deck of a polished, sunlit boat, the gentle sea breeze caressing their skin. Glistening waves danced under the radiant sky, enveloping them in a serene tranquility. She nestled closer, attuned to the steady pulse of the engine, the distant calls of seagulls weaving through the air. He rested a tender hand on her stomach, a smile gracing his lips as he felt the life moving inside. He spoke gently about how everything has changed since we first met. "The journey was fraught with challenges, yet I hold no regrets about it." She inclined her head, finding comfort as she leaned against him. "I don't either. We find ourselves here due to that wild, enchanting evening." He tilted his head, looking at her with fresh affection. "I love you," he said simply, as though he had finally given himself permission to voice the words. His voice wavered just a bit, infusing his confession with a genuine depth that enveloped her heart in a comforting glow. She smiled, even as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered softly. The words resonated with a sense of hope and promise, serving as a steady anchor amidst the chaotic waves of their past, offering a soothing blend of closure and optimism. Months later, we catch sight of them on the deck of one of Ethan's luxury ships, arms wrapped around each other, the babies nestled in a stroller, sailing toward a radiant future, a testament to how even the most unexpected turns of fate can forge a lasting, treasured connection.